Have you all had a chance for a little break? Good. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started with our old book collection here and kind of discuss how we got involved with all this. So believe it or not, we actually bought our first old book, James, was it August of last year? I think it was. So we have literally only been doing this for less than a year, but God has really blessed, and it's been very rapid as we've gained stuff. And what you're seeing here today is a small portion of the books that we have. We actually left cases of books at home. Mike, I think James may need a mic because he's going to help me with a couple of the things here if and when I ask him to. So anyway, we're going to kind of dive into history with some of these old books, quite literally, and we're peeling back the curtain about some things that have been talked about for centuries, but we have the actual physical proof of it here. And this is the proof of the Protestant Reformation. The first book that I'd like to discuss is actually our oldest work, and it is the Decretum Gratiani. Decretum, Gratian, is the lawyer who wrote this book. He was a Catholic priest, monk, and he was kind of a lawyer, and he liked to basically annal church history. So he wrote down all the different epistles and everything by the Catholic Church and enumerated them into what is called canon law. So this is a Catholic book of canon law. So I'm going to point out some interesting statements here. On page 53, James will point to it there. There's a section of text that says, Inter canonica scriptura as decretals epistola cum... How do you say that last word, James? I don't know. Your Latin's better than mine. Cumberanter?
Connumeranter.
Connumeranter. So in layman's terms, among the canonical scriptures, decretal epistles are counted. So this is placing that book that James is holding on the same plane as the Bible, which I think you and I as Protestants would take issue with. One of the other interesting things is on page 131, Distinctio 40, if the Pope is to be found negligent concerning the salvation of his brethren, useless and remiss in his works, and furthermore silent about what is good, which harms him more, and nonetheless leads countless people in large groups to follow him into the first bondage of hell, destined to be beaten with many stripes forever, no mortal presumes to rebuke him for such faults, for he himself is to judge all, and is to be judged by no one. So, where are they placing the Pope with this statement? That's a problem, I think, as Protestants. There's another statement here on page 314. It is quite clearly shown that the pontiff cannot be entirely bound or loosed by secular power, as it is established that he was called a god by the pious Prince Constantine, whom we mentioned earlier, since it is manifest that even God cannot be judged by men. So where are they putting the Pope with this statement? They're calling him God. Right. Now, if you go further forward to page 870, talking about St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, Pope Gregory XIII wrote a statement here, enemies of the ecclesiastical religion must be coerced by arms. Now, this is the same Pope who was basically the one who minted a coin celebrating St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre occurred in 1572, and it was in Paris, France, where there was a lot of Huguenots that were there at the time. And in one day, they came and slaughtered thousands of them. And they took the bodies of the Huguenots and dumped them into the Seine River. And they had to pay city workers about a week later, and they dragged 1,100 bodies out of the Seine River alone. So it was a terrible massacre, and so Pope Gregory XIII, who wrote this statement that's in that book, minted a coin. And that coin shows an angel of death, or an angel, holding a cross and a sword standing over the bodies of dead Huguenots. Now, this coin is also spoken of in the Great Controversy. We have an actual copy of that coin right there that James is holding. Now, one thing to note about our coin, the original coin was minted in 1572. Ours is from the 1600s because what they kept doing is they kept restriking new copies of the coin every 100 years or so. And so ours is a little bit later, but it just shows that they didn't just make a one-time mistake. They kept claiming this prerogative for hundreds of years that they had done a good thing in slaughtering all of these Huguenots. Now, we also have 2 pages here from a very old Bible, and this is the same Bible that would have come over on the Mayflower. This is from the 1583 Geneva Bible. This predates the King James Version, which came out in 1611. But it's still written in English, a little bit Old English, but you can still make out what it says. This is a pulpit Bible. It was a large Bible. It would have been kept up here on a pulpit like this and preached from. And it was a study Bible. They actually have footnotes on the side of it. And this is basically their version of a study Bible. Now, theoretically, this book could have actually been the one that came over on the Mayflower. I don't know for sure. Nobody knows the exact one that came over, but it was a 1583 Geneva Bible that came over, and there was only a few hundred of them that were made. So theoretically, it could be this one. Now, if you look at Revelation 13 and you read the last verse, verse 18, "Here is wisdom, let him that hath wit count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. This number is 666. So that was their 666 verse. What's interesting is to look at the footnotes right there, right next to it, and it says, "Such as may be understood by man's reason, for about 666 years after this revelation, the Pope, or Antichrist, began to be manifest in the world." Now, we just said that this is the book that came over on the Mayflower. So this nation started with people that believed the Pope to be Antichrist. How times have changed. Another interesting section of text that made its way into this book is actually a section of text from the donation of Constantine. Now, the donation of Constantine was this decree that is much, much older, that was supposedly from Constantine, giving the papacy its political power. It was later determined that the donation was a forgery. Now, that didn't stop the Catholic Church from putting it into their canon law that they co-enumerated with canonical scripture. Okay? So, it's a forgery. But what's interesting about it is in that section of text, you will see a title there, Vicarius Filii Dei. And that title, if you take the names and you add it up in Roman numeral form, Vicarius 112, Filii 53, and Dei 501 equals 666. And there were people long before Adventism that also figured out this title and said, that's the papal title that adds up to 666. So we just had a discussion about the Geneva Bible and Revelation 13:18 that says, "Let him that hath wisdom count the number of the beast." Some translations say the number of the name. Well, there's the name, and it adds up to 666. James, tell me a little bit more about that and what it means to be constituted.
Well, if you think of the United States Constitution, which is our founding legal document, to constitute something is to establish by force of law. So there is no other title out there that within Catholicism, I would say, is as firmly founded in and promulgated in canon law. It's actually declared by force of law constituted. Now, some people have talked about triregnums, or was it on the tiara, or different things like that. But really, the highest authority within Catholicism for establishing something by force of law, you're looking at canon law, which was also affirmed by multiple popes in apostolic constitutions, papal letters, back and forth. So it was used over and over and included, incorporated.
So when we get finished with this presentation, come up here and take a look at page 316 and see the Vicarius Filii Dei for yourself, because there are a lot of people, even some in Adventism, who say, oh, that doesn't exist, or oh, that's not the right papal title, or well, there is some name that adds up to it, but it's not that name. But we have overwhelming proof, and James has a number of other slides from a variety of online resources that show overwhelming proof. James has also taken to editing Wikipedia, and he's actually edited the Wikipedia page about Vicarius Filii Dei and put some of the original research up there, title after title after title after title after title, that says Vicarius Filii Dei over and over and over and over again, ad nauseum. So The next book that we'll talk about here is the Abbot's Oath, and this is found in a little book called Pontificale Romanum. Now, the Pontificale Romanum, this was printed in MDC LXXX2, so that would be 1682. And so this is a liturgical book. It contained rites, ceremonies performed by bishops. And it was a small book. You could easily slip it inside your robes as an abbot. And if you look on page 62, it has an interesting oath. What's really cool, come up afterwards and you can see, is in the actual oath, it has a red letter N right there. And so that's where you would insert the name of whoever's saying the oath. So it would be like, I, Alex, do so solemnly swear that I, Alex, will do X, Y, Z. And so you would insert the name wherever you were going to say. So it said, I swear that heretics and schismatics and rebels to our Lord, the Lord Pope, or his successors, I will to the extent of my power persecute and beat down. So this is not a religion of free will choice. This is a religion of coercion. The next book that we have here is a Sacrosancta Concilia. Now, we actually have the entire 18-volume set of this. You see one volume of it right there that James is picking up. We've got another 3 to 4 volumes in our packouts right here, but then we left several of them at home. So we have total history. I mean, you look at the whole collection, when you stack it up, it's like this big of just like old tomes. And these are from the 1600s, and they contain the history of the Catholic Church for, 1,700 years or so, right about. And so some of the things that they say is, we prohibit also that the laity should be permitted to have the books of the Old or New Testament, unless anyone from motive of devotion should wish to have the Psalter or the Breviary for divine offices, or the Hours of the Blessed Virgin, but we most strictly forbid their having any translation of these books. So you'll see Catholics that'll say, well, we gave you guys the Bible. And I'm like, I struggle with that because you guys are actually forbidding the use of the Bible. And we have that well documented here. There was another book here, another section of that text. Paterines and other heretics, whereby whatever name they are considered, we decide that what they affect, that they may be burned alive in the sight of men by the fiery judgment. So the Paterines, they were a group of people in the 11th or 12th century in northern Italy, and they followed a simple lifestyle. They were opposed to the wealth and power of the Catholic Church, and as such, they were persecuted by the Catholic Church, and many of them were burned at the stake in punishment. I always tell people, metaphorically, these pages are dripping with the blood of God's people. Now, this next section of text has a rule in it called ad extirpanda, Rule 25, XXV right there. And ad extirpanda, it says, the head of state or ruler must force all heretics whom he has in his custody, provided he does so without killing them or breaking their arms and legs, as actual robbers and murderers of souls and thieves of the sacraments of God and Christian faith, to confess their errors and accuse other heretics whom they know and specify their motives, and those whom they have seduced, and those who have lodged them and defended them as thieves and robbers of material goods are made to accuse their accomplices and confess the crimes they have committed. So this book right here, this Sacrosancta Concilia, was written by Philippe Labbé and Gabriel Cossarth. Now, look here, if I can point my thing. I don't know if you guys can make it out. What does that say right there? Society of Jesus. These are Jesuit books. So this is what the extent that they would go to. There's discussion. Have you guys heard about the Jesuit oath, the extreme Jesuit oath? And you can look it up. It's incredibly gruesome, graphic, talks about using the leaden bullet and the point of the poniard, and what you cannot achieve in open, you were to achieve in secret and silence. And there's a lot of people that have doubted it over the years and said, oh, that's just, you can't corroborate that type of thing. The thing, though, that I find is you have so much evidence that we do have here of being willing to burn people at the stake, the abbot's oath, persecute and beat down to the extent of my power. I don't think it's a far reach to say that the extreme Jesuit oath is likely legitimate. And I think that, by its very nature, you would not find it printed somewhere more, historically well known. Also in the Sacrosancta Concilia, James was talking about the prohibition of buying and selling, and we find that in these books. Neither let any commerce be held with them in selling and buying, that the comfort of humanity having been lost, they may be compelled to return from the error of their way. Forbid under an anathema that any should presume to keep them in their houses or on their lands, sustain them, or transact any business with them. This is how they dealt with enemies of the Catholic Church. There's a saying, there's nothing new under the sun. Do you think we're going to see a return to some of these ideals before the end comes? I think that we will. Further on in the Sacrosancta Concilia, we see, take care so that the sheepfold may be one. It is now divided into parts. Take care at last that we lose not that salvation, that life and breath which thou hast given us. For thou art our shepherd, and thou art our physician, thou art our governor, thou art our husbandman, thou art finally another God on earth. Deus in terris. Do you see that there? Also in the Sacrosancta Concilia, like the lion, the king of quadrupeds, thou another lion, not another king of men only, but made the king of kings and monarch the whole earth, wouldst bring back, allure, and recall to thy fold other sheep which are not of this fold. Gird thyself, therefore, with thy sword upon thy thigh, O most mighty, for thou also hast two swords, the spiritual and the temporal. Have you guys looked at the Vatican flag? It has gold and white on it. It has two keys, and the two keys are crossed like this, and then they have a red cord that binds them together. And those two keys were representations of state power, or political power, and religious power, and the combining of those two. And you see it symbolized right on their flag. And I think that you see a similar aspect of it right here, the spiritual and the temporal. Further on in the Sacrosancta Concilia, but weep not, daughter of Zion, for behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, comes. Behold, God has raised up for thee a Savior who shall save you from the hands of the spoilers. We have expected thee, O most blessed Leo, as the Savior that was to come. If you actually put God's name in this, you could almost, you could say like, well, that's pretty good. But then they put Leo in there. And so I take issue with that as a Protestant. Now, James talked about the Council of Trent and how that was the hot topic that they used to say, you Protestants are nothing but an uprising that rejects authority because you're not actually studying the Scriptures, because if you did, you wouldn't be keeping Sunday. The Sabbath, the most glorious day in the law, has been changed into the Lord's day. These and other similar matters have not ceased by virtue of Christ's teaching, for he says he has come to fulfill the law, not to destroy it. But they have been changed by the authority of the church. So we have it right there in these books here in front of you. Going back to the Decretum, there's an interesting statement here on page 1297, and it talks about Sabbath keepers. And on page 1297, in Distinctio 3, it says, Gregory, servant of the servants of God, to his most beloved sons, the Roman citizens, it has come to my ears that certain men of perverse spirit have sown among you some things that are wrong and opposed to the holy faith, so as to forbid any work being done on the Sabbath day. What else can I call these preachers but preachers of Antichrist, who, when he comes, will cause the Sabbath day as well as the Lord's day to be kept free from all work. For because he pretends to die and rise again, he wishes the Lord's day to be had in reverence, and because he compels the people to Judaize, that he may bring back the outward rite of the law and subject the perfidy of the Jews to himself, he wishes the Sabbath to be observed. Ellen White talks about, in The Great Controversy, how the change took place. And it was a gradual change. And it started off with telling people that they had to fast on the Sabbath. but they could feast on Sunday. And so it gradually became this onerous object to not do anything on Saturday, but on Sunday it was a day off and a day of, freedom, and you could do whatever you want, and you could, you don't have to work, and you can go feast and eat whatever you want. And so gradually it changed people's minds to where they started out of tradition keeping the Sunday rather than the Sabbath day. Further on in Sacrosancta Concilia, Canon 4, or Volume 11, although it is enjoined by the precept of divine law to abstain from all servile work on Sundays and holidays, yet some transgressing this precept in rural works and handicraft days presume to exercise the aforesaid. Lest, therefore, by transgression of this kind, the faithful people incur the indignation of Almighty God, we decided that no one on Sundays and the worship festivals dare to practice manual arts without any urgent necessity or evident piety, and then of the special permission of the priest. And transgressors of the prefect's confession are to be punished by the sentence of excommunication by their ordinaries. So they would start to punish people that were not keeping Sunday holy. Further on in the Council of Friuli in 791 AD, we command all Christians to observe the Lord's Day to be held not in honor of the past Sabbath, but on account of that holy night of the first of the week called the Lord's Day, when speaking of that Sabbath which the Jews observe, the last day of the week, and which also our peasants observe. Do you want to be a peasant if it means keeping God's law holy? I'd rather be the peasant. I don't know, James, I don't know if you're keeping up with me or not, sorry. Council of Laodicea. Christians must not Judaize by resting on the Sabbath, but must work on that day, rather honoring the Lord's Day, and if they can, resting then as Christians. But if any shall be found to be Judaizers, let them be anathema from Christ. So, if you're having to tell them not to Judaize by resting on Sabbath, what does that mean? There's people that are resting on Sabbath, right? So we can see clearly that history is on our side. At the Council of Narbonne, Canon 4, 589 AD, no man, freeborn or slave, Goth, Roman, Syrian, Greek, or Jew, shall do any kind of work on the Lord's Day, nor shall they yoke up cattle, exceptioning in case of necessity. But if anyone should presume to do it, the freeborn shall pay the magistrate 6 solidi, and the slave shall receive 100 stripes. So again, this is a religion of coercion as far as that goes. Now, we have a number of other books here as well that I do not have any other slides for, but we'll go ahead and discuss those in greater detail. One of the ones that I think is important is we got this catechism, actually, that was given to us, and so now we've had people realize the collection that we have, and they're actually coming and giving us books. And James, that book, is it from 1846, I want to say? I think that's when it is, roughly right around in there. But James, go ahead and read a couple of the statements off there. This is written in question-answer format. So go ahead and read some of those.
Have ye any other way of proving that the church has power to institute festivals of precept? Answer. Had she not such power, she could not have done that in which all modern religionists agree with her. She could not have substituted the observance of Sunday, the first day of the week, for the observance of Saturday, the seventh day, a change for which there is no scriptural authority.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, the French Revolution took place in 1798, and it marked the end of the 1260 years of papal persecution. And we know that that was foretold, that there would be a deadly wound, but then that deadly wound would be healed. Well, we actually have a newspaper here. James, if I can have that real quick. I have a newspaper here from 1798, March 12, 1798, the Anti-Jacobin. So the Anti-Jacobins was a series of papers written out of England that this is basically a political rag. They would sit there and talk about the political topics of the day. And they were conservative. And they did not like the French Revolution, but they also didn't like Catholicism. So it's an interesting piece. I've looked elsewhere, and there's, if you go online, there's a number of newspapers that you can find microfilm copies of, but it's very difficult to get your hands on an actual newspaper from 1798, but this one we did, and it's fascinating to hear what they have to say here. So again, take into mind that this is a political rag, so it is talking about politics, and it's written in that light. And this is talking about the news coming of General Berthier marching into Rome and deposing the then sitting pope, and he died in captivity. So let me start reading. The papers contain the details of the circumstances attending the entry of the French troops into Rome, communicated in a message from the Directory of the Councils, which for stupid bombast and awkward pedantry rivals or exceeds the most disgusting rhapsodies of the reporters of Robespierre. The message begins by stating that two governments, above all others, have shown themselves hostile to free and republican France, the Cabinet of St. James and the theocracy of Rome. The history of England is reserved for some more pertinent occasion, but the history of Rome, for the last 1,400 years, forms an essential part of the narrative of the transactions which have brought on the downfall of the papal government. At the present hour, an event which it now appears was intended to avenge not the death of General Dupont only, but that of Emperor Louis de Bavière. There is also some remote reference to the hitherto unpublished crimes of the Roman Emperor Tiberius. Upon this last cause of quarrel, however, no great stress is laid. Now let me drop down just a little bit and read you a little bit further. Not content with having been for 1,400 years the most bloody, perfidious, murdering, massacring, and assassinating government upon earth, Rome adds the last crime to the black catalog by the death of General Dupont. So, and then if you drop all the way to the bottom of the page, you can read about General Berthier declaring to have been a very prevalent notion. I'll let you read the rest of it when that time comes. But we know that deadly wound was given in 1798. Here, James, I'll hand this back to you. We know that deadly wound was given in 1798, where the papal states lost their power. They could no longer do what they had done for 1,260 years. Now, what happened? In 1929, we have a newspaper from the New York Times here. And we actually have a certificate of authenticity sitting in one of these things here because they start including those with some of the more recent works. But if you look on, I think it's page 4 of that, which this one is very delicate and it tears easily, so we'll have to fold it open very, very gently. But it talks about the Vatican regaining its power. Now, I went online to newspapers.com, and I found in 1929 a whole host of newspapers across the country, and I'm talking many newspapers, and they all used the same language over and over and over again. Old wound healed. Old wound healed. Now, this paper doesn't have it. This is a little bit more of a secular newspaper. Obviously, it's the New York Times, but tons of other newspapers across the United States published the statement, old wound healed. And so we know that is when the wound started to be healed. That it obviously wasn't healed entirely, but I think that as you have seen time go on since 1929, that wound has continued to heal for many years. And now, here in the United States, which used to be a bastion for Protestantism, you have the second Catholic president that was elected, obviously, Biden, and now you have a Catholic vice president. Then you also have 7 out of 9 Supreme Court justices that are Catholic. You have a whole host of Catholics who have come and become more popular in the current light. And we're going to get into that into our Sunday Law Update as well. But James, you have an interesting book there called Tentativa Theologica, I believe. Go ahead and read and tell everyone what that has in it.
So Tentativa Theologica was an interesting work. It was, this particular copy here is actually an English translation from the 19th century. And it reads, Tentativa Theologica, Episcopal Rights and Ultramontane Usurpations by Father Antonio Pereira de Figueiredo. He was a priest and doctor of Lisbon. What's interesting about this book is he was opposing some of the ultramontane or really kind of pompous statements that the popes had proclaimed. So the ultramontane opposers would have had issues with statements like the Pope claiming to be God on earth. kind of quasi-Protestants, if you will, within Catholicism, but obviously not recognizing the full extent of Rome's problems. But what's interesting is he comments on a statement in the Extravagantes of John the 22nd, Credere Dominum Deum Nostrum Papam. What's interesting about that is Great Controversy, page 50, comments on the Pope being styled our Lord God the Pope. This particular priest at Lisbon recognized that as well. Now, over the years, some Catholics have said, well, that crept into the gloss of Extravagantes in the 16th, 17th century. And so it was not actually there in the original 14th century document. Well, the problem, though, is over the past 10 years, actually going back to about 2010, the papacy, or actually Rome, has been digitizing a lot of those older manuscripts. So now we can actually go back and check the original 14th century document. Vat.lat, or Vaticanus Latinus 1397 is the manuscript. And if you turn to folio 166V, verso, 6th line down from the top on the left, you can find the full gloss in the original Credere aut Dominum Deum Nostrum Papam. So that statement that Ellen White spoke in the Great Controversy, for the first time, we were actually able to go back and locate it in the original 14th century document, a citation that we haven't seen within Adventism up to this point. This is groundbreaking evidence actually proving the Great Controversy correct. Now, our Catholic opponents have stated online and elsewhere that they couldn't find Anthony Pereira. They'd never heard of him. Well, we were able to locate his book, get an English translation of it, and have the footnotes of it actually mention from the 19th century that particular statement. So they were certainly aware of it internally. The Great Controversy stands vindicated.
James, you also have two books there, The Faith of Our Fathers and The Faith of Millions. You want to explain those briefly?
So The Faith of Our Fathers, put out by James Cardinal Gibbons. This is the one that has the statement, "You will not find a single line authorizing the sanctification of Sunday. The scriptures enforce the religious observance of Saturday, a day which we never sanctify." So we read this one this morning, but here's the actual book itself, and you can read it within it. We've also got another work right here, the Question Box Answers. So this is one that we read this morning, talking about the Seventh-day Adventists. If the Bible is the only guide, then the Seventh-day Adventist is right in observing the Saturday with the Jews. So you will find that statement in this book as well.
James, can you hand me the German money there? The German money.
Okay.
Now, one thing that's going to be interesting is we actually have an upcoming episode. You can have it. We have an upcoming episode on our YouTube channel. We're actually scheduled to shoot it July 18, so this coming Friday. I have a lawyer from New York. She is a Seventh-day Adventist, and her specialty is cryptocurrency. Her name is Eva Tompkins. I believe she's been here before. I was talking with somebody, and she's been here before. So we're going to be discussing having her on our channel for a podcast-style discussion about where the U.S. is heading as far as money goes. One thing that we have that's kind of interesting, and this is a little bit of a sidestep outside of religion, but I think it bears careful note to watch, is, back in the 1920s, you had the German mark, and one German mark would buy you a loaf of bread. And you can see that German mark right here. That's an actual German mark from 1920. Now, if you look at what happened in Germany, you had hyperinflation that took over. And so what I have here is just a few years later, I think this is 1924, I think it is, 50 million marks on one piece of paper. Notice the back of it doesn't have any ink on it. That's because it was so expensive that they decided not to print on the back of it because it cost so much money. What you had take place was hyperinflation. They got rid of the currency, basically, because they just printed so much of it that it devalued it, and there was accounts of people that would take a wheelbarrow load of cash to go to a grocery store to buy a loaf of bread, and they would leave the wheelbarrow sitting outside, and they'd come back, and all the cash is sitting in the gutter, and somebody had stolen the wheelbarrow. So, that's an interesting lesson because we do know that there's going to be a no buy, no sell that takes place. Now, if you have cash, if you have a $100 bill and it's actually worth something, you can go out and you don't have to conduct your business where the government knows and can oversee and can stop you from doing it. But I'm excited to have Eva Tompkins come on our channel and talk about cryptocurrency and how it relates to the current push for a central bank digital currency. We're seeing that push in society. Now, could it be a slight variation of that? I'm not saying we have a perfect lens for the future of what that is going to look like, but I think that we should be wise and see the potential for what is coming is absolute control over what you can buy and sell. Already they have a pretty good form of that. They can take your credit card and debit card and lock it, and most people's cash is tied up that way. But I think this is an important lesson in history to look at, just kind of as an aside. Now, James, you also have a newspaper there from 1888. This is the Christian Union, and this actually discusses the Blair Act. And I'll go ahead and read a segment of this. We have received a copy of the Sunday Rest Bill presented by Senator Blair and accompanied with a request for signatures to a petition in its favor. This bill prohibits all secular work and recreation in the territories of the United States, prohibits all mail carriage on Sunday with the proviso that whenever any letter shall relate to necessity or mercy or shall concern the health, life, or decease of any person, or the fact shall be plainly stated upon the face of the envelope containing the same. Provisions can be made for its transportation and delivery. The bill also prohibits Sunday commerce between the states, Sunday military drills, and Sunday payment of wages. And this discussion goes on. Now, ultimately, the Christian Union, I'm happy to see that at the bottom they actually say they cannot recommend this bill. But this shows that the United States has a track record, at least in the 1880s, of pushing for Sunday rest. I looked online and I found numerous newspapers that were talking about this. This was the Talk of the United States. Those are not quite them, but those are discussing persecution that took around that time. But in 1888, there were multiple discussions about the Blair Act, and it garnered 6 million petition signatures. And there was a lot of hype about the 1888 Blair Act. In a country of 50 million people, 6 million people signed it. That's a lot of people. You try and get that many people in the United States currently to agree on something, and I think you'd have a hard time. But shortly thereafter, and James was holding those up, these are articles that we found in 1895 talking about persecution of Seventh-day Adventists. And James, if I can hold those for just a second, I wanted to read some off of them. Suffer like true martyrs. Chain gangs and jails cannot break the spirit of Seventh-day Adventists. And there's actually a depiction of the chain gangs right there. There was other statements here as well. And I'd encourage you, come up here and read about the bravery of those in our faith who stood for the truth though the heavens fell. Because it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to be persecuted and made a public spectacle. And this wasn't just one location. There was people across the United States who were Seventh-day Adventists who were jailed. Now, one of the most interesting cases is of a man who was on his own property, and he decided to dig a well. So he's digging his well on his own property. He's not disturbing his neighbors, neither by sight nor sound, and that was what they argued here, because he's underground. He's not bothering anybody. He's on his own property, and they still convicted him, okay? So, there's Ellen White talks about this. She says that when that Sunday test comes, we're not to go and make a public spectacle about it. We're not to go and display our washing on Sunday, she says, and those type things. Nevertheless, these Adventists held to the truth and refused to pay a fine to get out of jail. And as a result, it made national headlines. People around the world were interested in why these men who, and what's fascinating is reading these articles, the Sabbath keepers almost universally are described as upright citizens, like the best kind of neighbors you could ever have. That should be what we are described as, right? Let the only thing that we stand up for be the truth of God's word. So anyway, take a look at these afterwards, and then we actually have a full page print out there from the Chattanooga Sunday Times, because, we're from the Chattanooga area, and it made headline news. It was the top article right there at the top left, the Chattanooga Sunday Times, 1895. So I just think that these are important to not forget. This actually is what was going on around Southern Adventist universities starting, and as a result of it, they almost moved the school because of this persecution. But finally, it quieted down, and they were able to build Southern Adventist University But it was kind of touch and go there as to whether or not they were going to be able to do that. Let's see. Now, as far as some of the other works here, James, do you have that one from some of the, no, not the coin, some of your printed slides underneath that you have there? Do you want to discuss some of those briefly?
Yeah, this one right here is from the Waldense Prose at Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland. There are some opponents of Adventism who have claimed that the Waldenses were not fans of separation of church and state like Adventism. But if we go right here to their prose on Antichrist, they called it a work of Antichrist, that he governs with the secular authority, governs not with the Holy Spirit, but with the secular power. And so there's evidence that they opposed the union of church and state and identified the persecuting tactics of the little horn power. So that's some of the evidence. We have a whole presentation on the history of the Waldenses where we go into a lot more detail on what they believed and taught.
Do you have your old document there from about 1,000 years ago that points out the Vicarius Filii Dei, James?
Yes, we have several documents here talking about Vicarius Filii Dei. These are ones that are available from the Vatican Digital Library, and you can come up and take a look and see if you can locate them. We've got multiple different manuscripts here, and these are talked about in some of our...
Yeah, that's the one right there.
Yeah, this one right here. This is in Terra Pax Hominibus. It's a copy of the letter that was delivered to the East at the split between the East and the West in 1054. And this particular handwritten copy or transcript of the letter, I'm not positive is actually that old. I think it might be a little bit newer, but it's available from the Vatican Digital Library, so it's a copy of it direct from them.
But it is handwriting, so it probably dates it before the advent of the printing press, which was around 1400 something, so yeah. It would be before then.
So I will pass this one out, and you can see if you can locate Vicarius Filii Dei on it. It's on the right-hand side.
I promise once you see it, it's quite clear, but it's hard to pick it out. So see if you're up to the task of finding it on the page.
So some of these manuscripts are hundreds of pages and long, and to locate something like that in it requires a little bit of time to dig through those manuscripts and to locate the incipit, and then get your bearings in the text and locate the precise statement. But if you've ever played Where's Waldo, you can take a look and see if you can locate Vicarius Filii Dei on these manuscripts and find your way through the handwriting. So here's another one right here that we'll pass out as well. Kind of a little bit of a puzzle if you've never read the Latin before, but each one of those does have it on the manuscript. This right here is a copy of Justinian's Codex, which contains the decree that made the Pope head of all the churches in 538. And one of the things that I find interesting, and I've found this on several manuscripts of Justinian's Codex, you will see a little head inscribed right at the operative point where the Pope is made head of all the churches. They inscribed it actually in art. So you can see at the operative phrase, there's a little head that is inscribed, and it's where the Latin is omnium ecclesiam caput, or the head of all the churches.
Now, there's actually another work that we have on its way, which is by Samuel Moreland, The History of the Piedmont Valley. And this work is one that we have wanted to get for a very long time, and we've sought after, and we finally found an original copy from I forget the exact year. I think it was 1650, I think it was, yeah.
Somewhere around in there.
Anyway, praise God, we were able to actually purchase it. It is in Europe, and it is making its way very slowly. We're very impatient to see it because it's really cool. But it is making its way to the United States, and it should be here within a month or two. It contains a map from the actual Piedmont Valley that shows the 7 valleys of the Waldenses, and it actually talks about the history of the Waldenses in the Piedmont Valley. So we're really excited to show that. So all that to say, basically this collection is ever growing, and we're hopeful to get more as time goes on. And we're hopeful that some of these old works will inspire God's people to help spread the message of what is soon coming on this world. James, is there any other old documents you wanted to go over there before we take a short break and then jump into our Sunday law?
I don't think we covered the 1766 one down here.
Oh, yeah, no, we didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. This work down here is Lucius Ferreris, Prompta Bibliotheca Canonica Juridica Moralis. And it has some interesting statements that the Pope is of so great authority and power that he can modify, declare, and interpret divine law, that he's not merely a man, but is quasi Deus, or like God, and vicarius Dei, or the vicar of God, that he can be justly called the appellation of Most Holy, Sanctissimus, Papa Sanctissimus appellatur. Also right here, that he is quasi Deus in terra, or like God on earth. And once again down here, that he can modify legis divinas, divine law, modificare, declare, vel interpretare, modify, declare, and interpret. So this is published by one of the ultramontanists within Rome, who was very much for papal primacy and supremacy, Lucius Ferreris, and this one's from 1766. We got the entire 8-volume set of Lucius Ferreris, which used to be in some library hidden away for many years, 8 volumes from Ireland.
Now, it's at this time that we typically like to have people come up and take a look at the books, and any specific statement that stood out to you, come look at it for yourself and see it with your own eyes. We also have stickers for our ministry that we give out, and we also have cards. We would encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So why don't we take a brief intermission where you can come up and take a look at the books, and then as soon as we're finished with that, we'll jump into our Sunday law update and kind of go from there. But I'd encourage each of you to come up and see where the term vicarius filii Dei is, so that you can see it in the original text. And any statement or anything that you wanted to look at, come take a look.
Thank you. Okay, so
Okay. Cue Leah. It's like 72 slides, so probably hour and a half. Hour and 10.
say what?
Oh, when they're going to set out the food.
Oh,
This will probably take us an hour, at least.
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. We're not in a big rush, though. Whatever. James, we're going to need audio for this. We're going to need audio for this somehow. That's true. There we go. That'll work.
Crank the volume up.
Yeah.
It's right there. Very simple.
Okay. For my computer audio, I think I'm going to use this roving microphone, by the way, just to hold it up to the speaker. So, James, have you checked to make sure your audio output is not running through the HDMI? All right. If you guys are ready, let's go ahead and jump into what has been happening more recently. And we can kind of show what we have seen going on for the last couple, 2-3 years. Is there a way to turn this screen on right here? Is this booting up or? Oh, the projector. There we go. Perfect. Thanks. So, James and I have both been kind of going more into the Sunday Law Update theme where we talk about what's going on in society. This has been kind of popularized. I don't know if you've heard of Dr. O down at his church in State Line. So he sort of popularized it, but we realized there's a lot of God's people out there that are wanting to see what is going on, because Ellen White talks about the Sunday law making its way in darkness. But the thing is there's still some hint of it. If you got a flashlight, you can see through the darkness and you can see what is coming upon this world. So we started collecting slides of articles that were talking about Sunday rest, articles that were promoting Sunday rest. And we put a little compilation here of those. Just see how many news articles there have been that have been talking about it. If you're not paying close attention, you'd miss them. But nevertheless, they have been there. So let me play that right now.
Yeah, we'll make that law.
Sabbath blue laws.
Blue laws.
A blue law.
Blue laws.
Blue laws.
Blue laws.
Sabbath laws on Sunday. But maybe the Sabbath laws.
Blue laws.
Blue laws.
Blue laws.
Sunday closing laws.
Blue laws.
Blue laws meant everything was closed.
The blue laws.
Blue laws.
Blue laws.
Blue laws.
Maybe Sunday Sabbath laws.
The blue laws.
Blue laws.
Or Sabbath laws.
Sabbath laws. Sabbath laws.
I remember the blue laws.
Stories about the blue laws when
These laws are known as blue laws.
Blue laws.
Blue laws. It used to be this thing like we would impose that on the entire culture.
to remember the blue laws.
They have the blue law.
They were called blue laws.
Sunday blue laws. Everything has to stay closed on a Sunday.
Germany still has blue laws.
So blue laws were Sunday, everything shut down.
Blue laws in America.
The idea of blue laws still makes a lot of sense.
We had blue laws.
Remember the blue laws? Any of you remember reading about that at least?
Almost every state had what was called the blue laws.
Is everything's closed on Sundays. They still have blue laws on Sundays, so everything's closed.
The only way to start the return to moral order in this country is by force. It's the only way.
We really need to be really ruthless when it comes to the exercise of power.
Does that sound concerning? The problem is that there's an Achilles heel in the United States Constitution. There's people that will say, oh, well, they can't enact a Sunday law because that's going to, violate, the separation of church and state. And yet, you actually see here in Article 1, Section 7, the discussion about when a bill should be passed by the House of Representatives. And if you look down there, it's the only time Sunday occurs in the entire United States Constitution, but nevertheless, it does occur. It says, Sundays accepted. So there are people that look at that are saying this today, that are saying Sunday rest is actually enshrined in our Constitution. It's right there. Sunday's accepted. We're not to be doing, submitting these bills and getting them passed and that type thing. So the Supreme Court has already ruled that Sunday laws are not constitutional with the Supreme Court case Maryland versus McGowan. Not unconstitutional, sorry. Several employees of a discount department store sold a few items, such as floor wax and loose-leaf notebooks, to consumers on a Sunday, and by doing so, they violated Maryland's blue laws, which only allow certain items, such as drugs, tobacco, newspapers, and some foodstuffs, to be sold on Sundays. So the court found that the blue laws did not violate the free exercise clause because the employees allege only economic injury and not infringement on their own religious practices. So we're seeing some of the groundwork being laid for Sunday legislation. I'm sure many of you have seen the following clip right here. There's been senators for years that are beginning to kind of push for Sunday laws. Listen to this.
Knives, or you can use whatever. It's the soul that is corrupt. And how we get back to a moral rebirth in this country, I don't know, since we are slowly eroding religion at every opportunity that we have. Probably we should be debating a bill requiring every American to attend a church of their choice on Sunday to see if we can get back to having a...
So what is she encouraging us to do? Sunday laws. You're seeing the Sunday movement actually popularized in Hollywood drama as well. How many of you heard of this movie that came out and its discussion about a Sunday rest as well?
We are fighting a war 30 years in the future. Every 6 days, the white spikes disappear. They crawl back into their nests.
We call it the Sabbath, their day of rest. And that's when we insert troops.
You know, there's another Sabbath coming up tomorrow.
Yeah, I know. That's when I leave.
So one thing that's interesting with that is the Tomorrow War. That was the name of the movie, right? It was released on a Friday, okay? So what is the Tomorrow War? It's the Sabbath War, right? And they're saying this is happening in the future. And then the evil entity that they're fighting, these gruesome, grotesque creatures, they call them white spikes. It's a curious use of a name. Maybe I shouldn't read too far into it, but I can't help but think of Ellen White and us Sabbath keepers. I don't know, could be nothing, but I think it is interesting that we're seeing this discussed in Hollywood today. You also have Professor Justin Kirkland, and he's kind of strategically positioned. He's a PhD out of Iowa, and he actually talks about from right to right how holy days became a natural right in medieval England, how law was lived, prosecutions for non-observance of holy days in medieval English ecclesiastical courts. And so he talks about this basically. So you're seeing the thinking men of society discuss this on a greater and greater scale across the United States and across the world. You also have Europe pushing for Sunday rest. Let me just play a brief portion of this clip, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
The major biblical argument for a healthy work-life balance is Sunday rest. And this rest is rooted in God's rest after finishing His wonderful work of creation the seventh day. And Sunday rest helps humans to be watchful also about the danger to become slaves to work. It's a time of rest, it's a time of creativity, and it's a time also to dedicate for relationships. Humans are not machines, but they have their families, have their dreams. And so the Jesuit European Social Center is committed in the Sunday Alliance because we firmly believe that this helps humans for fulfillment.
So, the thing is Ellen White actually talks about how the proponents of Sunday rest, they're going to do it for seemingly good reasons. Is it right that families should have a day off to spend in rest and quietude? Yes. God instituted that. It just happens to be the wrong day. I find it interesting that you have a lot of these proponents hearkening back to creation, and it's like they're blind. They don't see that the day that God reverenced is not the day that they're pushing, and they don't see a problem with changing that day, despite God's law saying otherwise. You also have COMIS right here, the Bishops' Conference Union in Europe, and let's see what they have to say.
Hi, my name is Alix, and I'm policy advisor at COMEC, which is the Commission of the Bishops' Conference of the European Union. With the COVID-19 pandemic, many people are suffering from poverty and loneliness. This is why we need fraternity.
So anyway, she goes through and talks about why we need Sunday rest and why that is beneficial to society. You had a huge push of this actually during COVID. There was article after article after article that would discuss this. You also have the European Sunday Alliance, and this is the SESI, the trade unions. Didn't Ellen White talk about trade unions and their role in end-time prophecy? I must admit, I read that probably 10 years ago, and this was before I was kind of a nominal Christian at the time, and I remember reading that, and that was one of the quotes that stuck out to me from Ellen White that I was like, I just don't see it. We just don't have that big of trade unions. It's just not that big of a thing. At least that's what I thought. And then to see this, to see the unions in Europe pushing for it, she was right. We're seeing the push for it. We're seeing them come together, and there's actually a long clip about it, but I won't play that today. So you also have the discussion about Climate Sunday. Climate Sunday is talked about over and over. Pope Francis had his encyclical where he talked about the care for our common home, and he was actually instrumental in pushing for it. How many of you saw the YouTube movie that YouTube itself put out? I'm not talking like a specific channel. I'm talking about YouTube, the corporation, put out that was talking about the benefit of fraternity, and that was basically enforcing some of the Pope's statements. There was a video that they came out with talking about it. But let me play this clip right here.
As Christians, we believe that the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. We are confident that God calls us to be part of restoring all of creation to full life.
That's why this year, as the UK prepares to host the United Nations Climate Summit COP26, churches across the UK are getting ready to take action through Climate Sunday.
Climate Sunday is an initiative of the UK Church's Environmental Issues Network. We're calling on churches all across the country to get involved in taking action for climate justice.
So, what does it involve?
We're inviting churches to begin prayer and worship. Our calling to climate action begins with our faith. Hold a climate service, and together as a church family, begin to explore why action for the climate is part of our discipleship.
We're also inviting you to commit to long-term action for creation. In this crucial year for our climate, we as churches can play our part in the journey of our whole society towards climate-positive living. Discern the next step for your church to take together.
Finally, we're inviting you to speak up. The church can bring a distinctive voice to the call for climate justice, rooted in our faith in a just and generous God. Join with others in calling for our leaders to be courageous at COP26 and to take ambitious action for creation.
This is a year for our church to live.
I won't play the whole thing because it goes on for a long time. But you know, the thing is it's not just that they're calling for a day of rest. They're wanting a synchronized day of rest. That's something that you see over and over, is the notion of synchronized rest. Take a listen to this.
Dear friends, as a long-term sponsor of the European Sunday Alliance, I'm proud to support the goal of ensuring the work-free Sunday. A synchronized week time of rest is very important in our fast-paced world. The work culture of modern society doesn't leave enough of time to enjoy with our loved ones. Children spend more and more time online. This not only affects their relationship with parents, grandparents, and siblings, but also seriously impacts their development and mental health. Mental health of adults is at stake too. As a member of the Committee on Employment and Social Matters, I repeatedly call on better work-life balance and more quality time offline, time spent with family and friends. Therefore, on the occasion of the European Day for Work-Free Sunday, I encourage all stakeholders to jointly continue our efforts to turn the idea of a synchronized day of rest into reality. It is essential for well-being of all citizens and better functioning societies.
Did you catch that? Synchronized rest. So she's working with the European Sunday Alliance in combination with SESI, so it's part of the union structure, right? Now, if you have synchronized rest on Sunday, and that's the day that you're calling for, does that mean that you can have off Saturday? You can have off Sabbath? I think you'll find it increasingly difficult to do so. You also have popular artists out there. This is Kanye West. I'm just going to play a brief snippet of this because I don't like some of his terminology that he uses. But what does he say? Listen very carefully.
Close on Sunday.
Did you catch it? Closed on Sunday. I won't play any more of that. But closed on Sunday. Kanye West. You have popular artists that are pushing for it. Now, this is the climate, the Conference of the Parties Climate Change Action Calendar. What do you see right there in the middle on November 13th? There's a whole day that's blanked out, and it just says Rest Day. So at their conference, they didn't have anything. Now imagine if we had a similar conference. I mean, you have a lot of people that are traveling all over the world to get there. Most of the time you're trying to maximize the time that you have at a conference, right? And you're having meetings, but they're very intentional about having their rest day during it. What about Trump here? Now, Trump is not Catholic, right? But he has certainly surrounded himself with Catholics. Listen to what he talks about right here regarding the Pope.
Through 4 decades of communist rule, Poland and the other captive nations of Europe endured a brutal campaign to demolish freedom, your faith, your laws, your history, your identity, indeed the very essence of your culture and your humanity. And when the day came on June 2nd, 1979, and 1 million Poles gathered around Victory Square for their very first Mass with their Polish Pope, that day, every communist in Warsaw must have known that their oppressive system would soon come crashing down. They must have known it at the exact moment during Pope John Paul II's sermon, when 1 million Polish men, women, and children suddenly raised their voices in a single prayer. We want God. Together with Pope John Paul II, the Poles reasserted their identity as a nation devoted to God. You stood in solidarity against oppression, against a cruel and wicked system that impoverished your cities and your souls. And you won. We can still hear those voices that echo through history. Their message is as true today as ever. The people of Poland, the people of America, and the people of Europe still cry out, we want God.
Can you see the deadly wound being healed? We have the NACL, the National Association of Christian Lawmakers. Christians trying to make laws and force conscience.
The National Association of Christian Lawmakers was formed in August of 2020. And since that time, we now have members and supporters in all 50 states, as well as Puerto Rico. We have elected state officials that are serving as state chairs in their respective states in 29 different states, all in just 24 months. We invite you to become a part of what we are doing. We believe that this nation would be better with more godly leaders serving in elected office at every single level. We have the National Legislative Council, which has 7 committees. We're the only faith-based paralegislative organization in the country. Historians tell us that we are the first National Association of Christian Lawmakers in the history of the United States. We invite you to join with us. Go to ChristianLawmakers.com and become a member today. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
What does Ellen White in the Bible talk about? There's a threefold union of apostate Protestantism, spiritualism, and Catholicism that is going to come together. And we're seeing the inroads of that being built as we speak. You see Christian nationalism coming to the surface and being pushed continuously.
The reason we had so many overreaching regulations in our nation is because the church complied. The church is supposed to direct the government. The government is not supposed to direct the church. That is not how our founding fathers intended it. And I'm tired of this separation of church and state junk that's not in the Constitution. It was in a stinking letter, and it means nothing like what they say it does.
Strong words. Listen to Sean Foyt. He's an American singer, and he's rejecting the notion of church-state separation. What does he have to say?
That's why we get called, well, you're a Christian nationalist. You want the kingdom to be the government. Yes. You want God to come and overtake the government. Yes. You want Christians to be the only ones that, yes, we do. We wouldn't be a disciple of Jesus if we didn't believe that. We want God to be in control of everything. We want believers to be the ones writing the laws. Yes, guilty as charged.
You see that wall of separation between church and state. There's people putting sledgehammers to it as we speak. There's also Catholics out there. Are you guys familiar with The Vortex? Michael Voris, with Church Militant? He has some interesting YouTube videos where he actually calls religious liberty a snake. Take a listen.
Why doesn't God's side have unity? The answer is because from the very beginning of the nation, an error was accepted into the political fabric. The error that people are free to believe whatever they want about God, and that somewhere down the road, this wasn't going to present a massive problem in how the society orders itself. As we said, the snake coiled up under the table. Eventually, sooner or later, it's gonna bite you.
I don't like this. I don't like the fact that the Pope is doing this. I don't like the fact that there are Pachamama idols set up in St. Peter's. All of this, to me, is apocalyptic. There, I said it. This is apocalyptic. We are seeing religious leaders team up with eco people who are in favor of infanticide and abortion and contraception, team up with credit card companies, team up with social media, team up with China, team up with Joe Biden, team up with Hillary Clinton. All the usual suspects are teaming up. And what alarms me is Pope Francis is on that team. What is this? What is this? Francis is saying, may our common desire to build back better lead to cooperation between civil and ecclesiastical groups
So that's Dr. Taylor Marshall. I have one question. Is it apocalyptic? So this is Stephen Wolfe. He's an advocate for Sunday laws. He was actually the author for The Case for Christian Nationalism. And James has actually had a little back and forth with him, I believe, online. So it's interesting what his take is. Take a listen.
And that one of them is civil law, and the other one is social customs. So civil law is just something that we're basically ordered to do by the magistrate for our good, and so this everything from speed limits, and I think also Sabbath laws. And we can get into more on that.
We're going to have to because you just took people. They were with you with speed limits, but they lost you on Sabbath laws.
Yeah,
but we'll come back. That's all right.
Sabbath laws. I mean, we haven't got
to
blasphemy yet. Blasphemy law. You do what you can so that they can worship God and the church can administer word and sacrament. And how, in particular, how would you do that? You'd have Sabbath laws, and Sabbath laws are not simply to punish violations of Fourth Commandment, but to provide the conditions in which people can worship God without distraction.
So did you see there's two individuals in this clip, right? You have this guy who was speaking, but then the other guy is Jared Longshore. He's the one with the beard. We are scheduled to have a podcast-style discussion with him on the 23rd. So that is coming up rapidly. That should be interesting. We also have Dr. Chad Pecknold here. Now this clip actually, James, why don't you come up here and talk briefly about this clip and the link? And I wanted you to actually discuss a couple of the other individuals up here. Tell me a little bit more about Jared Longshore and Dr. Chad Pecknold and their push for Sunday laws.
Well, Jared's not Catholic himself, or at least does not profess to be to my knowledge, but Dr. Chad Pecknold is. He's speaking here at the St. Franciscan University of Steubenville. This conference was actually put on by Sohrab Amari, editor of the Catholic Tribune, if I remember correctly, and one of the co-presenters at this conference was J.D. Vance. So this is what Dr. Chad Pecknold presented at that same conference.
And you'll see a little brief overlay on this video clip, and this is because we actually made this.
I don't think on this one we do.
Oh, do you not? Okay.
Yeah,
I thought it was this one.
A public orientation to God then reflected where? Reflected in concrete ways, in national holidays, in civic liturgies, in laws, indeed, Sabbath laws, Sunday laws that would require a cessation of what? Commerce. A cessation of all that commerce, of that
So he's pushing Sunday rest at this conference that J.D. Vance is a part of. So J.D. Vance has heard this. Our president and our vice president is being influenced towards this direction. Of course, he's Catholic, so that falls in line. But let's go forward here to Dave Miller and listen to what he has to say.
Well, that includes, of course, going to church on Sunday. That's a fundamental doctrine of New Testament Christianity. You need to worship God on Sunday. All right, so should we go around and force people to go to church on Sunday? Here's what the founders would say. No. Should they go to church on Sunday? Oh, absolutely. In fact, if too many of our people quit going to church, our country's going down the tubes. They'll become irreligious, greedy, focused on just fanning the flesh and doing all the things that people do these days, even on Sunday. But we're not going to compel anybody to go to church on Sunday because we got freedom of religion. The government's not to interfere with it. However, from the very beginning of our country, right up until at least the 1950s and 60s, our country always had in effect on all levels of government what they called blue laws. Blue laws were there for the purpose of discouraging any form of regular business taking place on Sunday. Notice that. We're going to make you go to church on Sunday? No. But are we going to make a law that says nobody is to open their business on Sunday and conduct regular business? Yeah, we'll make that law. That's not an infringement upon your religion. Nobody's dragging you into the church building, trying to make you be religious. but we're not going to accommodate your unbelief. We're not going to encourage your irreligion, because our civilization is based upon Christianity, and it depends upon moral Christian people in order for it to be perpetuated. We won't mistreat anyone for refusing to embrace what they call true religion.
How many of you heard the sermon by Norman McNulty about the 4 stages of the Sunday law? I see several of you have. He breaks it down excellently. He goes through some Ellen White quotes and talks about how she kind of breaks down the different stages. And the first stage is just going to be, just don't work on Sunday. The second stage will be, you got to be in church. You got to be worshiping then. The third stage is going to be, okay, you can't be worshiping on Sabbath, and if you do, there's going to be fines or imprisonment. And the fourth stage is, okay, now there's going to be a death decree. So we see these proponents, and they're peddling the first stage. They're saying, oh, we're not going to force you to come to church, and yet we know that ultimately there is an end to this. So Rusty Reno is the editor of First Things, and he is pushing a Sunday law.
I do think the state legislature in Colorado ought to prohibit youth sports leagues from having practices or games before 2 o'clock on Sunday. This is a serious problem now for church-going families. Their kids get real fired up about sports, and they're on travel teams, and next thing you know, they're not going to church anymore because they got to go to games that are scheduled at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning. I mean, that is at some level an imposition of Christianity upon the unbelieving, but I just think it would be good for the country in general for people to be more firmly anchored in church life.
So, are you guys familiar with Jordan Peterson? Listen to what was said here.
It's shifted to Sunday because Christ is seen as the new creation.
Right, so fine. Are you, it's okay, are you bound, is a Christian bound to Sunday?
Well, I would say
Yes.
it depends on...
Yes.
I would say
Also-
yes. But Dennis, remember, the difference between reality and ritual is in the Hebrew scriptures too.
Did you see he was about to object and somebody else cut him off? I wonder if there was a demon there that specifically stopped that, because Jordan Peterson he's a fairly logical guy. He was like, and then he gets cut off. It's interesting. But then let's go forward and see what Jordan Peterson actually has to say. This is him commenting on Sunday.
Well, you might ask, well, what have we lost by losing the Sabbath? Because we've lost it in a real sense. And I would say, well, we threatened the integrity of the family. We've stopped doing anything communal together that is oriented towards a higher good. We sacrifice all the time instead of stopping that on Sunday. And that means we exhaust ourselves in sacrifice. That's for those who work all the time.
This next clip is with Jared Longshore and Timon Klein. And again, we're excited to have a discussion with Jared Longshore, but listen to what they have to say back and forth.
And then you also want to make it easy for Christians to do Christian things. I mean, that's the main rationale given by courts for Sabbath laws. It is in our tradition, it is historical, but the main thing is we don't want Christians economically on Sundays to be overcome by non-Christians just because they want to worship the Lord, right? That's not a choice they should have to make. We want to make it very easy for, and make it clear to everyone which Sabbath we're in favor of. That's the religion we want to be perpetuated. So that's just all over the place.
Which Sabbath? Very clear, which Sabbath? This is Jared Longshore talking again. Let's take a listen to him.
If our civil rights come from the triune God, does it not follow that civil allegiance must be paid to him? We might stamp "In God We Trust" on our money. We might declare that we are one nation under God. We might structure our civil affairs such that on the one day in 7, which God has deemed holy, we rest from our work and worship him. This civil and public acknowledgement should certainly be formalized in our governing documents. How could we do any other if our rights come from him? But it is not going to stop there. If our rights come from God, then won't it follow that our laws must come from him? It would be quite strange if our rights came from God, but then the law of our land paid no regard to what he has revealed. I dare say that the God-given rights might collide with the laws of our land if those laws went rogue and didn't pay attention to the rights giver. Moreover, if our rights come from the triune God, then does that not mean that we would need leaders from him as well?
So we're looking at a number of different Christian nationalists who are kind of all working together. This next clip is Stephen Wolfe with Douglas Wilson. or actually this is just a discussion that they had, but this is coming out of New St. Andrews College. This was our discussion with Lennox Califungua, which if you haven't, take a look at our YouTube channel and you'll see a link for the first discussion that we had with him just a few weeks ago. And it was an interesting back and forth. And he believes that we should legislate all 10 of God's commandments in society today. But here is Jared Longshore with Douglas Wilson as well. So Lennox, the host, he's had Jared Longshore on, he's had Douglas Wilson on. So there's a lot of these Christian nationalists are kind of working together. There's a question that was posed by the YouTube channel Answering Adventism, Miles, and he talked with Douglas Wilson, and listen to what Douglas Wilson had to say when questioned about Sunday laws.
Are Christian nationalists like yourself seeking to pass a national Sunday law that will eventually lead to persecution coming for those who want to observe Saturday as the Sabbath?
No, I've never heard anybody proposing that or talking about it or wishing that they could. I do believe that the Sabbath is going to be part of a reformation of our morals. I don't believe the fourth commandment has been retired in any way. So if there is a national reformation and revival, I believe that that will result in a national honoring of the Lord's Day. I do believe that that's going to happen. This is the extent of the persecution that I'd be willing to deploy against a Seventh-day Adventist. He would not be able to go into a shop and buy a shovel. That's the extent of the
Right.
That would be the extent of the persecution.
So I have a question for you then. He says, it's not persecution. You just can't go into a shop and buy a shovel. What if you're the owner of that shop that sells shovels? There's a commandment, and in that commandment it says, 6 days shalt thou labor. So if you force me to keep my building closed on Sundays, and I believe that the Sabbath is the seventh day, Saturday of the Lord God, are you not imposing upon me on my free right to labor 6 days out of the week? That's a question that I put to Lennox Califungua with our episode with Walter Veith that we are having released on Thursday. And Lennox's answer was, this is when it gets tricky. And this is where it would just be a lot easier if our Seventh-day Adventist brethren would just learn to keep Sunday holy with the rest of us. Because at the end of the day, you reach an impasse there. It is imposing, right? There's the National Conservatism Manifesto. And so this is the following statement was drafted by Will Chamberlain, Christopher DeMuth, Rod Dreher, and a bunch of other names here. But look at what it says. We see the tradition of independent self-governed nations as the foundation for restoring a proper public orientation towards patriotism and courage, honor, and loyalty, religion and wisdom, congregation and family, man and woman, the Sabbath, and the sacred. You're seeing a grassroots movement push from a variety of different sources that are pushing for a return to God as a nation. And it comes as a pendulum swing response to the left. You have a lot of the leftist ideology that has come out that a lot of common sense people are like, that's crazy. Like, you can't have somebody who thinks that they're a different gender every single day of the week, right? And so the natural response by most people is to say, that's crazy. We have to get away from that. We have to return to God as a nation. And so the devil has artfully pitted these two sides against each other. And as Seventh-day Adventists, we're not called to be deeply into politics. We're called to be Protestants. Before I'm a Republican or before I'm a Democrat, I'm a Protestant. I'm a Christian. So we try not to take sides with this because we are observers watching prophecy unfold, and we have a message to give. We don't have time to waste in arguing with other people about politics. But nevertheless, let's go on and talk about Timon Klein. He is the chief at American Reform. He's an attorney and a fellow at the Craig Center at Westminster Theological Seminary and the director of scholarly initiatives at the Hale Institute of New St. Andrews College. Let's see what he has to say.
In states like Tennessee, which precluded establishment of a denomination, still had a Christian test for office. They had robust blasphemy, Sabbath, and obscenity laws. Proselytizing was not a free-for-all. Morals were as regulated as health and safety. I propose it looks like winning if we ever get back to that situation. As Jefferson himself recounted, on Sundays, and this is ironic, even federal buildings were open to church services, which included the Supreme Court. And even after incorporation, the First Amendment began in the 20th century, Sabbath laws were still being enforced.
He says it looks like winning if we ever get back to that. Here's Aaron McIntyre. He is the host of the Aaron McIntyre Show podcast on The Blaze, if you're familiar with that. See what he has to say.
The individual worker who has a large family with many children may be unwilling to devote his entire life to the corporation. The devout Christian may oppose commerce on Sabbath or the practice of usury.
Going forward, you have Patrick Denton, America's pre-liberal past and post-liberal future, National Conservatism Conference. Listen to what he has to say.
Many mandated laws against blasphemy and required observations of the Sabbath. I grew up in Connecticut at a time when there were still things called blue laws, believe it or not. These kinds of mandates on behalf of the common good were common, frequent, and a deep and inherent part of the American tradition.
Are you guys familiar with Kevin Roberts? Yep, he was the president of the Heritage Foundation, which helps push forward Project 2025. Listen to what he has to say.
Called for, quote, restoring to our nation a proper public orientation toward the virtues of patriotism and courage, honor and loyalty, religion and wisdom, congregation and family, man and woman, the Sabbath and the sacred, and reason and justice.
You also have some of the more vocal people out there like Joel Webbin with Right Response Ministries, a little bit more inflammatory, but listen to what he has to say.
Adopt a distinctly Christian preamble, and then all the 10 Commandments must be legislated. What we've done is we thought the second table of the law, so second table meaning commandments 5 through 10, the commandments of God that pertain to our horizontal relationship with our neighbor, like don't steal, don't murder, these kinds of things. We think that should be legislated by the civil magistrate, but the first table of the law, not that. But that's not true. And I'm not just talking about Old Covenant Israel in the Old Testament. You look at King Alfred. You look at Constantine. You look at Richard the Lionheart. You look at Duke Godfrey, who chopped a Turk in half diagonally with one swing of the sword. These guys, they legislated both tables of the law. That's where all the prosperity comes from, because you can't hang in midair these second table commandments of don't steal from your neighbor apart from have no other gods before me. Idolatry is the fountainhead of the stream. You cannot have an idolatrous people and yet somehow have a moral people.
This is him as well.
First table laws being legislated by a Christian government in a nation. That would be examples like blue laws, being Sabbath laws, which we've had in America in our history. And you still have hangover blue laws on the books in places like where I am in Texas, like liquor stores.
New York City even has them.
There you go. Yeah, like liquor stores in Texas don't open on the Lord's Day until I think it's noon or something. It's basically after church. I'm in a smaller town, Georgetown, and there's a lot of restaurants that don't open until noon because the morning and every other day of the week. It's not like they just do that, 7 days a week. It's distinctly on the Lord's Day because in the morning you go to church. And so blue laws that's not a crazy thing. It's not like some hypothetical that's never taken place.
So you have Sohrab Ahmari, and he's a Catholic editor, and listen to what he has to say.
That they should be keeping the Sabbath in some significant way. You just published an essay in the Wall Street Journal, I guess an excerpt. What is your message of the Sabbath?
I guess I would argue for restoring Sabbath blue laws. Now.
And here's our vice president.
I think that the thing that we have to take away from the last 10 years is that we really need to be really ruthless when it comes to the exercise of power. I was talking about this with someone earlier today, where you remember there was some threat that congressional or Senate Republicans made. If you get rid of the filibuster, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. you actually look at it, it's like, oh, this is not that interesting.
We're going to actually deliver on our promises that we've made for decades.
Right? Sounds this is the threat. If you get rid of the filibuster, we're going to do this stuff. Like, they're talking about expanding the Supreme Court. They're talking about adding, 2 senators from heavily Democratic places.
You get rid of the filibuster, we'll actually deliver on defund.
We'll do what the base has been telling us that we don't want to do.
Yeah. So I think, look, I am a cynic about this and maybe even a little bit of a pessimist, but I think the challenge confronting American conservatives is that we have lost every major powerful institution in the country, except for maybe churches and religious institutions, which of course are weaker now than they've ever been. We have lost big business, we've lost finance, we've lost the culture, we've lost the academy. And if we're going to actually really affect real change in the country, it will require us completely replacing the existing ruling class with another ruling class. I say that knowing and hearing myself, it sounds really hard. It is really hard, but I don't think there's like a detent with these people. I don't think there's sort of a compromise that we're going to come with the people who currently actually control the country. Unless we overthrow them in some way, we're going to keep losing. And that's the challenge. Now, it's
So take a look at some of the more inflammatory comments that we're hearing out there as... I think that was right before, yeah.
The only way to start the return to moral order in this country is by force. It's the only way. It's the only way. It has to be by force, at least for a time. We have to regulate morality by force, at least for a time. It's literally the only solution. And people have to start to realize that it is the faith in God, Christian understanding of morality, it has to be the foundation. And this is not going to be done by choice. It's just not at first. It's not going to be done by choice at first.
I believe that morality comes from God and God alone. You can't force somebody to be moral. And if you do try, you'll end up with the ultimate hypocrites out there, right? You'll end up with people that it actually gives a false name to Christianity as a result. Now, what's interesting is J.D. Vance wrote the intro to a new book from the Heritage Foundation president, Kevin Roberts. And what's interesting is this book is titled Dawn's Early Light, Taking Back Washington to Save America. J.D. Vance wrote the foreword for this book, okay? And what does that book have? Policies that encourage religious observance, such as Sabbath laws and voucher programs that include religious schools, should be included. Vance, in the foreword, he quotes Roberts as saying that when twilight descends and a person hears wolves, you've got to circle the wagons and load the muskets. We are now all realizing that it's time to circle the wagons and load the muskets, Vance adds. In the fights that lay ahead, these ideas are an essential weapon. So you also have quotes from our president, Donald Trump, and Kevin Roberts shares that and said, "Amen, it's the Lord's Day. So if we want to end political violence, improve political discourse, and wake up in a normal country again, then let's start by being in church today." It's interesting. You know, there's been a lot of discussion out there about Donald Constantine Trump. What's interesting about this is there's a lot of people that are likening Donald Trump to Constantine, but that's not such a new concept to have a political figure who was also a religious leader, because you actually see that more in Roman culture as well, where you had Roman leaders who were the political leader but also the religious leader of the society. So listen to this clip right here talking about the notion of Constantine.
Through your leadership, you embody the values of our Christian faith and love for the gospel. You remind me of the great Roman emperor Constantine the Great. This emperor, your dear Mr. President, is the one who founded and built the magnificent city of Constantinople, my birthplace, known today as Istanbul. It is my great honor to present you with this holy cross. This cross is the very symbol that led this great Roman Emperor Constantine to victory. As Christ revealed to him in a vision, he said, "En tuto nica," told the emperor, means go with this and be victorious, Mr. President. This cross is an everlasting symbol of peace and an invincible trophy, a sign of divine strength and guidance. With this cross, I pray you bring peace to the world and make America invincible.
How many of you are familiar with Project 2025? You know, Trump actually distanced himself from Project 2025 by and large during the election because there was a lot of heat that was taken for it because of some of the ideas that were expressed there. There's actually an online tracker that I think it was just a random person made that actually goes through and tracks all the different policies that were enacted in Project 2025. And it's being enacted piece by piece, quite fast actually. One of the things that's interesting is in Chapter 18 of Project 2025, there's a section on labor. I'm sure you guys have heard this before, but it talks about Congress should encourage communal rest by amending the Fair Labor Standards Act to require that workers be paid time and a half for hours worked on the Sabbath. That day would default to Sunday, except for employers with sincere religious or observance of a Sabbath in different times. So there is exception that's in there for Seventh-day Sabbath keepers, but it does default to Sunday. The person who wrote this section of Project 2025 is a guy by the name of Jonathan Berry, and he was appointed by Trump to be the Labor Department nominee. And so he's currently waiting before final Senate approval. And so we need you guys to send in letters of opposition to senators now. We've been encouraging churches to do this, and we did this at the South Bay Seventh-day Adventist Church down in Chattanooga. And one of the members of that church actually created a website, No Blue Laws, I think is it nobluelaws.com, where you can go on there on your phone, and it'll tell you how to text your senator. And it makes it very easy. There's a pre-formed letter that you can put in there. So you should check that out. Because he is preparing to be confirmed. And the thing is he's the one that is primarily pushing for these blue laws. Let's take a listen to what Jonathan Berry has to say in regards to this. This is an American Moment interview. The clip is quite long, so I'm not going to play the whole thing. But basically, there's an idea here that fair labor standards are not a panacea. Basically, it's a good start, but we're going to have to do more than what's actually specified there. So if the good start is to have time and a half on Sundays, they're saying, that's not the completion of it. I'll play just a little snippet of it.
But there are implications for social conservative values across many issues. One of the interesting proposals that you've laid out in Project 2025 handbook from Heritage is stuff around the Sabbath. Mm-hmm. What are some of the ideas that you have there?
Yes. This is, it sounds controversial. Mm-hmm. In many respects, it is a return to something that basically always everyone ever had. Mm-hmm. And it's specifically the idea of encouraging Sabbath rest through discouraging commerce on the Sabbath. The proposal that's in our book is amending the basic federal overtime law, Fair Labor Standards Act, to require that overtime be paid for all work done on the Sabbath.
Interesting.
Yes. So I don't think I don't think Congress has the authority to mandate like a national closing on the Sabbath. That was always a state decision to do that. But let me add, it was always a state decision to do that.
They did it.
and yeah, I'm not saying this practice was uniform, homogenous, whatever, but very, very widely spread, and only recently in the last few decades have most states moved away from this. So this is, I think this is about as far as the federal government could properly go in this space, but it would be an encouragement and inducement to rest, but really to kind of coordinate commercial activity for the other 6 days of the week, which is as long as we've had Sabbatarian civilization, beginning in Israel and continuing into Christendom. This is something that's been increasingly a part of the rhythm of civic life. Most importantly, for people to have space to worship and honor God, and secondly, to have times of communal rest with their families and with their communities.
Do you think
So I'm not going to play the entire clip there. James actually reached out to Jonathan Berry. He actually spoke to him on the phone first, and then he also sent him a text message. James, do you want to come up here and kind of describe your interaction with Jonathan Berry, Trump's Labor Department nominee?
Yes, so I actually was looking around for contact information, happened to find a number, gave it a ring, and recognized his voice on the other end of the line. So we were trying to find out when he was getting confirmed before the Health, Education, and Labor Pension Committee. He was a little bit tight-lipped about it, but expected confirmation to move forward. So far it has. It actually passed the Health Committee. But I did give him a follow-up text to give him a little bit of context for the call. I said, Honorable Jonathan Berry, I actually went and tried to phrase that particularly in that way, out of respect, but thank you so much for taking my call. I apologize for any interruption and do not intend to cause any further intrusion beyond a brief reach out to help provide context for the call. When I called him, I was like, hey, because it's a cold call, I said, Jonathan, I was just curious when your confirmation hearings came up. He says, who's this? I said, it's James. James who? And I explained that I had followed some of his work online. He took it well, but just to help understand, I was reaching out because I'm a Seventh-day Adventist social media influencer and have followed closely your work and also Project 2025 for quite a while. We as a movement have long opposed Sunday laws, but also even those implemented with exemption clauses as a step towards church-state tyranny. We remember how in 1888, Senator Blair and Mrs. Batum tried something similar by offering us an exemption to pass the Blair Act in 1888, and we declined such a proposal, for we are opposed to all Sunday laws from the time of Constantine until now. We are concerned such an exemption is only a step towards exclusive and more intrusive Sunday rest laws. We join many 17th and 18th century reformers like Tillam, Carlo, Chamberlain, and others who identified Sunday as Rome's mark of authority in Bible prophecy. We have also long expected a movement like Christian nationalism to push for Sunday rest by law in the United States of America, and just recently passed out thousands of books called The Great Controversy in D.C. at the inauguration warning about such. I just recorded an episode for one of our channels with nearly 250,000 subscribers, and we've been discussing your work. If you're ever open, I have numerous channel connections, and we would love to dialogue with you openly and respectfully. Our position is the state can only ever regulate outward civil behavior, but the only real change for someone morally in the New Covenant can be effected by the Holy Spirit, which writes the law on our heart. Our concern is not only a biblical one about which day is holy, but also that the Sabbath bears not Caesar's name or superscription, and thus it is outside his authority to legislate. Equally, we are concerned about Bible prophecy's revelation about a church woman uniting with beast state power, implementing 4 distortions in the first table of the law, Revelation 14. Of false worship, Commandment 1, Image 2, Name 3, and Mark, which correspond to the first 4 commandments of the Decalogue, On the true versus false marks, see Exodus 31:17, Ezekiel 8:9, Exodus 13:9, Deuteronomy 6, Ezekiel 20, verse 20 and 20:12. I also recently obtained scans for Isaac Backus and John Bacon's works from Library of Congress, identifying the United States from its very foundation as the second beast of Revelation 13. It is an old Protestant position we hold. We are most interested in your nomination because of your positions regarding Sunday laws and Art 1, Sec 7, Clause 2 of the Constitution, which, as you know, is appealed to by constitutional proponents of blue laws. We have long expected someone such as yourself to push for such movements. Even should it not be you, at some point someone will do it. We intend you no harm, but see the movements as a fulfillment of Bible prophecy and pray for you. Once again, I do not intend to intrude or cause you any burden, but rather to merely reach out once for clarity. Out of respect and concern, even despite disagreeing, you are in our prayers. Respectfully, James Bowen. He did respond. Actually, the next morning I was kind of surprised. He's spoken with Todd McFarland. Those of you who've been watching the GC in session have probably seen Todd McFarland up front. He is our General Conference lawyer. So they've been in discussion multiple times. He's glad to engage, but after he's through the confirmation process. So that he recognizes between now and then to kind of hide the discussion a little bit and not get involved. So you can see right there that statement from his. These are the members of the United States Health or Education Labor Pension Committee, which at this point, this is kind of not really a list that you need to go through because he's already made it through this committee. This is actually old news, and right now it's before the entire Senate, so we can reach out to every senator that there is, all from all 50 states. Alex, I think as we close here, we do have some statements from Twitter. Maybe we could go through these real fast. These are evidences right here that Sunday legislation is now being popularly talked about and called for. You can see evidence of this in multiple tweets about supporting blue laws, individuals across our nation. You know, I think sometimes when people think of a popular demand, they think of people running through the street, you know, maybe carrying bullhorns and carrying signs. But these days, a lot of agitation occurs online, and you're seeing that reflected more and more, where individuals are calling for blue laws, ensuring Christians can worship freely. The founders would concur. That's why they promoted things like Sunday blue laws. Can we get culture laws? I want blue laws, naturally. And stating right here, we will ban abortion, do away with no-fault divorce, install blasphemy laws, bring back blue laws for Sundays, and that's just for day one. Support Project 2025. Bring back blue laws. You're seeing quite a lot of blue checks recently. This isn't even all of the statements that we found. But as far as Project 2025, it's interesting that right after the election, you had multiple influencers stating, "It's my honor to inform you all that Project 2025 was real the whole time." So can we admit now that we're going to implement Project 2025? Now that the election is over, I think we can finally say that, yeah, actually Project 2025 is the agenda. They tried to hide it.
You know, the thing is, we need to look forward prophetically. There's a quote by Ellen White that I think is very important that we should be looking at. In India, China, Russia, and the cities of America, thousands of men and women are dying of starvation. The moneyed men, because they have the power to control the market, they purchase at low rates all they can obtain and then sell at greatly increased prices. This means starvation to the poorer classes and will result in a civil war. There will be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. You know, I look at this quote, and this is actually written after the first Civil War took place. So when she says that there's a civil war, she's talking about something in the future. Are we seeing the inroads of this? You know, the largest private landowner in America is Bill Gates. You're seeing the moneyed men buy up the farmland. We're seeing war take place, war and rumors of war with Russia, with China. There's great threat of war between China and Taiwan, which would pretty much instantly implicate the United States. We can see that society is a powder keg about ready to go off. And a lot of people would look at this presentation and they would have fear. And they'd say, well, you guys are preaching a message of fear, of foreboding, of there's no hope. Our name is Heritage and Hope, because the heritage is we have a great heritage as Seventh-day Adventists because we are the historicists. We are the Protestants. We are the ones that have the history, that don't forget the history. But the second part of that name is hope. What does it say at the bottom of this quote? And at that time, thy people shall be delivered. That's a promise right there. It's a promise that everyone who is found written in the book will be delivered. You know, the Bible talks about 10,000 shall fall at one side and 1,000 at the other, but it shall not come nigh thee. We know that there's going to be a time of trouble that's coming, and our duty is to warn as many people as possible before it's too late. You know, in Matthew 24, Jesus talks about, as in the days of Noah, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Noah pleaded with people to get on the ark, and if they got on the ark, they were safe. Only 8 of them did, his family. But here we are at the end of time. Do you love your friends, your family, your neighbors? Warn them. Warn them to get in before it's too late. Warn them so that they can be delivered from what is coming. That is our message. It's the 3 angels' message to the world. Let's pray to close. Our dear Father in heaven, I pray that you would please be with us today. Help us to spread this message, the 3 angels' message. Help us to go into the world and tell all that we know. The great light that we as Seventh-day Adventists have, help us to give it, not of our own strength, but you working through us. Help us to be ready. Help our names to be written in the book of life, I pray. I pray for the outpouring of your Holy Spirit, that you would go with us, that you would convict us, that we might have a closer daily walk with you, that we may not be fearful, but that we may have perfect love which drives out fear. Help us to be ready, and we look forward to Christ's soon coming. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you guys for joining us.